I think the simplest view, Kirstie phrased the term bottle turners. Like when she, in 2004, this is going all the way back to then, when she first sort of, started looking at this, and then 2006 more in depth. When you turn a bottle, it was kind of like, I don't understand what's in this. When you look at food ingredients, actually, there's probably a large amount of that goes on as well. But, for something that you can absorb through your skin, like, it seems odd that a lot of those words seemed very scientific and not very clear. And going through a phase in our life where we were trying to improve our performance and health and looking at the food we ate very clearly and seeing that we wanted to eat organically or naturally where possible, it became obvious that wasn't as clear to the consumer. And at that point, we were more than consumers. We were people training people in beauty products. So it was like, what? And it wasn't our brand at this point. It was a number of other brands. It was just the training side of things that we started in. So Kirstie went back and talked to Phil, and we're like, what should we be avoiding? He's like, well, you should be looking for natural derivatives where as possible, if not organic versions of it. And Kirstie's does a much better version of this now. She's got a little picture with a tree and everything, kind of breaking ingredients down into how they're manufactured, how they're made. And to be clear, it is all about a statement of truth. Just because it is produced, in a certain way, like in a lab, that doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. But it's just for consumers to understand first and foremost. So there is those things that are produced, in a manufacturing facility from a number of components and are essentially not natural. Now, plenty of people will go, well, everything comes from nature, and that's fine. I understand that. But what we're looking at is trying to find things that you can find in nature and use as close to that as possible, with as little processing as possible. So anything like, salt, sea salt, anything that is natural but not farmed, can't be organic. So organic is like the top end, the most expensive to produce. It has to be grown in soil. So the Soil Association, the name gives it away, other people that accredit things as organic in this country, both cosmetics and food. So it has to be grown in the soil, has to be therefore looked after in a certain way. They don't use a whole host of chemicals, obviously. They very careful about pesticides. And that through them is a way of finding out that a product is actually the highest standard. But it's very expensive to produce that. The yields are lower. You have to go through less processing. And so you get a very potent ingredient, which is as close as possible to its original format, whether it be cold pressed when you get the oil out of it, and that's kind of the gold standard. But in the middle are natural versions of that. So you could still have a tree, because use the tree, like an apple tree could be grown in organic soil without any pesticides, with all the standards being met, and you get an apple at the end that's organic. Obviously, an apple is natural, and that could grow in nature without any of those things. But you wouldn't have necessarily know what had been put on it in terms of like pesticides, everything. And then there's, someone completely generating a fragrance out of a synthetic, nature in a lab. So there's like the individual like sections of ingredients, but for the consumer, that can be really confusing. So going back to the way we were, it's like, if you understand what it says as an ingredient when you turn the bottle around, there's a pretty good chance it's natural or organic. And that's a good place to start. There's then a whole list of things that over the years have become quite common, like touch points, like parabens, sodium lauryl sulfate, ingredients that have consistently been marked as having bad outcomes if you use too many of them. And so for us, the difficulty is, somebody will show you an ingredient and they'll say, oh, well, I've got a lot of data that says it's safe. And then there'll be other people that say, oh, there's this ingredient and it's terrible for you. Our stance is, if you wouldn't eat it, I wouldn't want to put it on me. And if ultimately it comes from nature and there's nothing bad being said about it, then that's a good place to start.